Can we buy the beta book? I think it's such a good idea.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so should I still use the microphone? I don't know. Well, the beta book was sort of for pre-sale on Kickstarter, and now we're sorting out creating an online shop. So hopefully we'll be open for pre-orders again soon. So the answer is no, not yet, but soon.
To get your inspiration, do you ever just walk around with a microphone and see what kind of music come up in everyday life?
Well, you can ask the organizers of the event. I don't know who was here this morning when I did it, but when I came in, the first thing that I did was I noticed this large Rockstar logo plate. And if you get a look at it later, it's pretty serious. It's made out of metal. So I wanted to know, like, you know, I wanted to know that. That was really important to me. So, so that's like my personal affliction, that I interact with the world as a series of musical instruments, and I've been known to test the squeakiness of my, mother-in-law's garage door, etc. It's it's a constant stream of input in that way. When a project comes along, then I think all of that, like, I don't know, day-to-day interaction comes to the fore, and I select then which objects are going to be my performers. But I do make field recordings sometimes when I find the ambiance of what's happening is particularly memorable. I think the last one was we were in New York last summer, and there was a guy playing tunes on a cheap Casio keyboard in the subway. But he kept playing the same chord changes. Like, it didn't matter what song it was. So he did like a rendition of Twist and Shout that was the same 2 or 3 chords, and then he did another rendition of Love Me Tender that was the same 2 or 3 chords. I mean, they're not the same chords. Like, he just kept. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
So with your visit now to Amsterdam, is there something that's inspired you as being ugly that will just serve as an inspiration?
Okay, so actually I find Amsterdam exceedingly beautiful, and I don't, because I'm in the avant-garde of my work, I don't consider it ugly. I consider it beautiful, but the glitchiness of it is considered ugly by the mainstream, at least until Skrillex came along. So for me, ugliness isn't really a source of inspiration, but it is a way of understanding kind of the progression over time of how things evolve into the mainstream. And pretty much every major art movement, every major fashion movement has started on the bottom of the cultural ladder, and people have considered it ugly. One example, which I draw a lot of inspiration from, is the Cubists. And when the painters who became known as the Cubists first started painting, they didn't call themselves the Cubists. Journalists called them Cubists, and it was derisive. It was like, oh, you're Cubists, you're painting these angular, chunky forms, and that was considered ugly. Only as that progressed did they appropriate that term for themselves and sort of claim it for themselves.
How do you start stringing sounds together in your videos? I mean, where do you begin?
Where do I begin? Well, it's kind of like an inanimate object casting process. So if for instance, the work I shared with you that I did for Minnie, I started with character, actually. So I first tried to develop 3 characters that I felt would be strong, different personalities, and then I started to try to describe those characters through the objects that they own, because I think the objects that you own tell a lot about who you are. So by defining the character first, then I could sort of find a logic for how I would pick the objects. But then there's also a musical process. I need something that gives me some kick. I need something that gives me some highs, some mid-range, some melody. So there's sort of an evaluation of all of the different musical properties and looking for balance. If I'm trying to do something balanced, if I'm trying to do something shrill, then I'll just use spoons and keys and high-pitched metal stuff. But usually I'm looking for a range.
And did you get to where you are via being a musician or via being a video, whatever you do?
I've been making electronic music since the year 2000 when I first got my own computer, and then it was about 4 years just making electronic music and drawing in parallel. and thinking I was headed sort of towards animation, actually. And then when I started shooting video, I realized, wow, this is so much faster. I get 30 frames a second. I can just move the camera around and just capture tons of frames. I don't have to draw every frame. Amazing. And I thought, yeah, this is so much more efficient. I'm never going to be an animator. And then, wouldn't you know it, now I edit videos at a rate that's actually slower and more tedious than cell animation. And I usually go over each frame at least 4 or 5 times. So I'm actually more fastidious and more anal than an animator.
How do you, in terms of the process of getting the beats, how are you sequencing them? Are you doing that in a music program or in an video editing program?
So I'm actually doing all my composing in a video editing program when it comes to audiovisual work. When I just work purely with sound, then I usually work with Ableton Live. But when I'm doing video, I'm working in Sony Vegas, and I'm editing everything by hand. Some of the sequencing that I do originates actually as beatboxing, because I'm actually a sort of a old hat at beatboxing. So if I have a really complicated rhythm that I want, the fastest way to get it out in the way that I work is to just beatbox it and start from scratch that way. And it was very flattering when I recently found out, you go online, you can find it, there's a demo tape of Michael Jackson doing a multi-track, totally a cappella version of Beat It. And he didn't actually have that much musical training, so actually that was the way he did a lot of his arranging, was just multi-tracking his own voice. So it's actually a really great sketch pad, is just using your voice for sequencing, I think.
When you're working with a video editor, do you put your eye more on the audio type or on the video type?
This is the most, if I had an FAQ, this would be the first question. I guess both. It depends on the piece, but with Faces of N, I was very much focused on the music first, because it was important that I had this idea that it was going to be a danceable EP, and it is. All those tracks of Faces of N are like pretty pumping electronic music. With other work where there's more of a cinematic approach, then maybe the image is dominant. But in the end, I end up oscillating back and forth between fine-tuning the sound and then adjusting the images. And so there's a very symbiotic relationship. And I've developed a lot of idiosyncratic habits about the way that I like to edit, which are kind of this constant process of juggling the two.
You just said that you can do some beatboxing?
I think it would probably work, but